if I can, in a very quick way, do that. Let's see. Oops, didn't mean to do that. Let's just cancel. Let's not do that because we haven't practiced. Okay, I'm going to start letting people in.
All right.
Okay.
I'm going to reshare my screen.
Okay. Great. Welcome, welcome. Thank you for joining us today with Dr. Allen. She'll be presenting on breathing basics, and I'm going to let her introduce herself in just a moment. But as you come in, why don't you just introduce yourself to us? Let us know where you're coming from. If you are a doula or a birth worker or personal trainer or a mom at home or whatever it is that you do, I'd love for you to go ahead and introduce yourself to us. Tell us where you're from, what type of work you do, and what you hope to learn today. So come on in as people drop in. They're just starting to get in. So glad you're here. Hi, Megan. Megan's from Southern Illinois, St. Louis area. Okay, cool. Birth and postpartum doula, welcome. Yeah, thanks for coming in today. I always love these Boost Your Knowledge sessions. It's one of the things that we kind of committed to doing as a company because for two reasons. One, I love learning from the birth professionals that I can beg and borrow and steal their way into this. So I'm always like, hey, how would you like to do a Boost Your Knowledge session? And then I'm like, speak on anything you love. But it's always fun to get to know the professionals in our area and kind of collaborative professionals who may not do exactly what we do, but I always think we can learn from them. And every time we have these Boost Your Knowledge sessions, I learn so much that I find myself trying to take notes and going back and listening. So welcome. Hey, Tammy, good to see you. Tammy's listening from a client's house and doing her best to stay present the entire time. May have to jump off at some point. She's a postpartum doula in Scranton, Pennsylvania area. So welcome. Cheyenne, you want to go ahead and introduce yourself? And as folks come in, give folks just a few minutes to get in.
Yeah.
Again, as you do come on in, drop us where you are and tell us what you do. So
Yeah.
at the end of the session, I do want to say that I will drop in the certificate for the 1 hour continuing ed from ICEA. So just know that I'll drop that in then. If you have questions, you can either put them in the chat or hold them till the end. Shan will do a Q&A at the end as long as we have time. So welcome, Dr. Allen. Tell us who you are and what it is that you do.
All right. Well, thank you, Miss Emily, for having me in here today. So I'm Dr. Cheyenne Allen. I am a physical therapist. I own Milestones Therapy and Wellness. So we have PT and OT, and we work with the breastfeeding baby. And so what I also see other kids as well. So I'll see kids with issues getting their milestones, developmental delay, that kind of typical therapy that you think of. But most of our clients are breastfeeding babies. So I see a lot of newborns. I see a lot of infants. They're kind of my favorites. So that fourth trimester really is, I'm in the thick of it on the baby's team, on the mama's team, seeing if we can improve the rest of their life by making sure that we can eat, that we can breathe, that we can move, that we can feel good in our body. So that's kind of what I do. The other things that I do is I constantly make lists of places that I want to go. So I am a national park lover. I'm a Disney theme park lover. And I'm always trying to go somewhere new. So, the St. Louis Arch is on my list for next year. I've heard that there's good barbecue up there. So, that's one thing that's on my list. And then Tammy says she's from Pennsylvania. So, my mom's exchange student from Spain last year is actually on a soccer scholarship to a Catholic high school in Hershey, Pennsylvania this year. So we will be going up to Pennsylvania within the school year to watch him play. So nice to have you guys here. Um, like she said, if you have a question over something that I'm talking about, you can drop it in the chat. And then if I don't see it, feel free to come off of mute to say something. Because I can't see the chat bar on my screen the whole time. Or if you just have a question for later, we can do it at the end as well. So let's go ahead. I'm going to make my picture of me smaller so I can see my screen. So breathing basics, the importance of nasal breathing in the breastfed infant. And of course, I made this PowerPoint presentation for you guys. I'm Dr. Cheyenne, PT, owner of Milestones Therapy and Wellness. So the three big things that we're really going to cover today is why is nasal breathing important? How can different postures, skull changes, and tethered oral tissues impact our airway and our jaw development? We know that those things can impact our breastfeeding journeys, but how can that go even further to feed? And the third thing is emphasizing the need for early identification and intervention so that we can kind of come in and catch these babies as they're teeny tiny and then prevent some things from happening later on in their lives. So a little bit about me. I'm Cheyenne. My hubby is in the military. He's in the Army. We have Miss Evie. She is now 5. My hair is not that long anymore. And then on the right, we have Finn, and Finn will be 2 in November. I like to say that I'm a minimalist-ish. I live in a house that is 350 square feet. So she's really tiny. And as much as I love living tiny, we have stuff on the walls from side to side. There are lots of clothes and things that are shoved in our house nice and neat. So I'm kind of a minimalist in the way that my house is small, but it is definitely filled with lots of things. And again, I'm a national park lover, and I have, fun fact, 3 different national park tattoos. Working on a lot more though. So how did I get here? I went to East Tennessee State University. I have a bachelor's of science in exercise science, and then I have a doctorate in physical therapy. When you graduate from PT school, you can kind of choose from a plethora of places to get into. So there's general pediatrics, there's women's pelvic health, there's pelvic health in general. There is wound care, geriatrics, neurology. There's all kinds of different things. So I started as a general physical therapist, and then I moved down into pediatrics, and then I moved further down into these breastfeeding babies. So I am not a lactation consultant. I'm working on it, but I consider myself a lactation savvy therapist. I have a lot of CEU classes, which is continuing education units, in these little tiny babies, which are my favorite to learn about, favorite to treat, and my favorite to talk about as well. I tend to forget how to breathe, and you'll catch me running out of breath during this presentation. And since this presentation is about breathing, I thought we could take a minute to take a breath. So the specific airway in for 4 counts. We're going to hold it for 4 counts, and then we're going to slowly exhale for a count of 8. So that exhale, as we breathe out, that's the part that triggers our parasympathetic pathway to help calm us down. So we're going to breathe in 1, 2, 3, 4. We're going to hold it 1, 2, 3, 4, and breathe out 1, 2, 3, 4. On your chest, one hand on your belly, and I want you to think about pushing your belly out and in. Our chest will stay still. So we're going to breathe in 2, 3, 4. Hold 2, 3, 4. Out 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. In 2, 3, 4. Hold 2, 3, 4. Out 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. One more round. In 2, 3, 4. Hold 2, 3, 4. Out 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. All right. Now that we're all breathing today, what we're going to start with is, what is the airway? So what is the anatomy of our airway? And we're going to start with upper and lower airways. So the anatomy and physiology of our airway and our respiratory pump. So our upper respiratory tract, it's going to consist of our nose, our pharynx, and our larynx. So our nose, inside of our nasal cavity, there are cilia in there, which are these little hairs, and those trap foreign invaders like germs, illnesses. And then we have turbinates that are inside of our nasal cavity as well. Those turbinates are wriggly looking, so that it can increase the surface area inside of our nose so that it can warm up the air and humidify it. So if you've ever gone outside and it's really cold and you take a big breath in, it's almost shocking. So our nose has a way via the cilia to trap foreign germs, and our turbinates can help warm that up and humidify it as it goes on down into our lungs. So our pharynx, that is the muscular tube that connects our nasal cavity down to our trachea and esophagus. And then our larynx, that is the area that protects from aspiration, and it also holds our vocal cords. So just a note for nasal breathing. This graphic, we're going to start with B, non-nutritive suck first. You can see that the black line here is sucking, which our tongue is just going up and down. And then the blue line, that is showing us where our air goes. So it's coming up from the nasal cavity, going down to our lung. So that's one airway. Moving to nutritive suck, the A sign, you can see there's a bit more things. So this black line from sucking becomes our black line for where our food goes. So it goes from our oral cavity down into our esophagus to our stomach. And then that blue line is still there for our airway. You can see in the back here is that swallow onset. So we have some gray lines there. They're just kind of showing us where air is and where food is, because we share that pathway. So when we are non-nutritive sucking and our tongue's just going up and down, our airway is nice and open. For nutritive sucking, that milk formula comes in to our esophagus while our air is coming down to our lungs. So little babies, our upper respiratory tract is also involved in our nutritive suck pathway. So if we can only breathe through our mouth as a baby, we can't efficiently coordinate that suck, swallow, breathe pathway. So that is when our babies can get choked a lot easier while they're feeding, or they will figure out where they're at again before they can take a few more sucks. So a note for nasal breathing is that it's easier to eat when we can breathe through our nose. And you and I know that because whenever we have a sinus infection or a cold and you can't breathe through your nose, eating gets a lot more difficult. So that was the upper respiratory tract. Let's look at the lower side of it. You have our trachea. Our trachea is made of rings of cartilage. That way it holds its shape nice and round. So you can feel some of those rings if you go right under your chin and go down. You will feel some muscles in there. You're going to feel your hyoid bone, and then you'll start to feel those rings of cartilage. Our trachea also has cilia, which are those hair-like, I just forgot the word. They're like hair to protect us from germs and foreign objects. And so if we bring something that's not air into our lungs, we can help cough that back up. So we can get rid of whatever foreign object that was. And it also helps to protect from some germs. After our trachea, we have our bronchi, and those split right and left into the right and left lung. And then once they're inside of the lung, they are going to continue splitting all the way down. Speaking of, we have two lungs. One of them has 3 different lobes, and the other one has 2 lobes. So our right lung is split up into 3 areas, and our left lung is split into 2. I'm going to let you think for a second on why that might be. So the right side, we have 3 lobes. On the left side, we have 2. There's more lung volume in our right side. On our left side, it's a little bit less because our heart is in the way. So on the right side, we don't have a heart on the right side. Our heart is on the left side. For most everyone. I can't say for everyone because that's not quite true. Most everyone, their heart is on the left side of their body. And so the lung has to make room for the heart. At the very end of our bronchi, as they branch all the way down, that's where we have our alveoli. And that is where the gas exchange happens. So our oxygen comes in, it's exchanged for carbon, and we breathe carbon out. And here's a really fun picture of that bronchi becoming a bronchiole, coming down into the alveoli. Those are, most everyone knows those as the grape-like sacs at the bottom of those bronchioles. Now, this specific picture, it's from a study where they were talking about inhaled nitric oxide. But as everyday breathers, we are constantly breathing in nitric oxide. But it's mostly, we notice it in our nose. So here's a note on nasal breathing. We know that when there's high levels of oxygen in the lungs, it's going to cross into the bloodstream. And those high levels of CO2 in the bloodstream crosses back into the lungs so we can breathe it out. When we breathe through our nose, there is natural nitric oxide that lives up here. And that acts as a vasodilator. And so that means that the nitric oxide actually relaxes and opens up our blood vessels. So there's less resistance for that exchange to happen. And then we get more oxygen coming into our bloodstream. So the study that this picture came from, they actually did inhaled nitric oxide to see what that change would be, if it would make a difference. And so you can see on the top, you have a little bit of CO2 coming in and the O2, the CO2 and the O2 switching. But on the bottom, when we have help from a little bit more nitric oxide, our blood vessels are larger and it's easier for them to come through. Right. Megan Crawford, you raised your hand.
Hi. Um, so since you're a PTOT person, is there anything we can do to increase the nitric oxide we're doing whenever, like, say we've got a cold and we're super congested and we need to open up those, our nose and the vein, excuse me, capillaries in our nose and stuff. Is there anything we can do to increase the nitric oxide we're breathing in?
Yeah, that's a fantastic question. Um, if we're trying to do it naturally, it's kind of crazy to think about this, but we're going to just try to breathe through our nose more. So I know when you first start getting a cold, getting some sinuses built up, if you concentrate on keeping your mouth closed and maintain just nasal breathing, your nasal passages won't close as fast. And so you'll keep that nitrous oxide through the nose a lot better. When it comes to, like, my nose is already stopped up, what can I do? That would be more of a medical question with different medications and things. So I don't know what medications that would be to help increase that nitric oxide, or if it would have a profound effect, if the pros outweigh the cons of trying to get a medication to do that. That would be a really fascinating study, though. Thank you for that question. Your hand is still raised. I don't know if I have to unraise it. Unraise it.
Sorry about that.
All right. So we've looked at the actual airway and what it looks like. So let's look at the respiratory pump. So what actually moves air in and out? So this picture here is our ribs. So that's why our skeleton is so important. Our ribs keep our lungs and our heart protected. As we breathe in, our diaphragm muscle contracts and pulls down, and our muscle pulls, our ribs move. As we breathe out or exhale, all of that relaxes and goes back to its resting position. So there are a whole lot of muscles that we can talk about. The main muscle that we use when we're breathing is our diaphragm. When we breathe out, we shouldn't actually be using any muscles to breathe out because it's a passive breathing out expiration. What we will see in babies that have colds, that are struggling to breathe, adults that are struggling to breathe, whether that's because we are in labor and we're breathing really heavy, or if that's because we have COPD or emphysema, we start seeing all these extra muscles coming in to help us breathe. So some of those are going to be here in our neck. And so the sternocleidomastoid, the scalene muscles, and then we have the intercostal muscles, and those are the ones that are in between our ribs. Those will start breathing in. You'll see the neck flex as we're trying to breathe in. With expiration, typically that's a passive event. Our rib cage is lowering back down. Our diaphragm is relaxing. But in cases like COPD, and emphysema, that's when we start having to use a little bit more muscle to force that exhale. And so you'll see that your intercostal muscles again will start pulling up. And then your abdomen. So we've got our ab muscles. All of those stomach muscles will start pushing to help us get that air out of the way. Help it get out of our lungs. So back skeleton. So we have the bottom, which is our pelvic floor muscles, and then we have our abs and our back that are giving us a nice pressure. So our body is made up of multiple different pressure systems because that's a whole pretty posture, and our pressure system is working nicely. That pressure builds as our abdomen pushes forward, and then the other three skeletons on here are just showing us different. Oh, am I breaking up?
You are for me, so I'm wondering if you are for other folks.
226.
It's on and off for me, yeah. Coming and going.
Megan says that I'm breaking up to you.
Okay.
Every now and then it's just
I want to
fine, and
switch
then every now
Wi-Fi.
and then it starts breaking up.
So weird. I'm going to switch Wi-Fi real fast,
Okay.
and then hopefully that will help fix the issue.
Okay, before you do that, if for some reason we lose you, everyone just stay put. And then
Oh, yeah.
and then Cheyenne will come back in if she needs to.
Hoping it'll just switch nicely.
Okay.
Okay, it switched.
All righty.
We should be good.
Yeah. Let's give it a
All
go.
right. Perfect. All right, I'm going to share my screen back. Where did it go? All right. So, back to the skeletons. So we have our nice, pretty posture on the left. And then the second, third, and fourth are just different stances that we have. So if our lower back is arched, if our upper back is too straight, or if we have a combination of both. So we've got this forward head posture and we're letting our butt stick out at the end. You can see how all of that changes the way that our diaphragm and our pelvic floor are working together for us to take a good breath in. So that's all of the anatomy and physiology. And it's not all of it, but it's a lot of it. So I want to talk more about, the structure and function. So different structures, different postures can have a lasting effect on our breathing, thus altering the function. So if we look at a baby that has lip, tongue, or cheek ties, we know from having the tongue tethered to our floor of our mouth that alters their ability to effectively drain the breast, and it can alter the way that they suck, swallow, breathe at a bottle, and you'll see a lot more spillage out the side of their mouth. So when we have tethered oral tissues like a tongue tie, we're going to see decreased oral function. When we see that, we can start seeing narrowing of their palate. So their palate, instead of that being nice and U-shaped, it gets closer and higher, which also means that if our palate is getting higher, it's going upwards into our nasal cavity. So that's decreasing space in our nasal cavity. which makes it harder to breathe through our nose. So then we're going to increase mouth breathing. Increasing our mouth breathing is going to lead us to a low-lying tongue posture, which is going to decrease our oral function, which is going to go back and make our palate higher, which is going to make our nasal cavity raise, which is going to decrease space, which is going to make us mouth breathe, which is going to decrease our lower tongue posture, which is going to decrease oral function, and it just keeps going. So you can see, and one of my soapboxes is tongue ties. Not necessarily we should cut them all, and not necessarily we shouldn't cut any, but looking at the actual structure and function and how those are working together. So here's a picture of that palate. So on the top, we have a U-shaped palate. On the bottom, we have a V shape. So just by changing the shape of our palate, that is going to change how your face looks. So when we have a pretty U-shaped palate, our teeth are not crowded, our teeth are straight. We're going to have wider cheekbones, our nose can stay straight, we'll have a wider face, and that's a better airway size in the back of our throat, in the top portion of our neck. When we have that V-shaped palate, so as we've let that palate raise, you're going to see that the teeth are more crowded. You're going to see that our teeth are not as straight. Your cheekbones won't be as defined. Your face will be more narrow. And then your nose can be crooked. And then you're going to have a set back jaw and giving you a smaller airway. So a lot of lactation consultants, I get babies from them and they'll say, gosh, their palate is so high. So it makes sense because these babies are breathing through their mouth and they're not using their tongue to seal against the palate to help make that U-shaped palate. So our tongue is laying in the bottom of our mouth instead of helping us keep that U shape. And so because of that, we start seeing these other face changes and breathing through our mouth instead of our nose. So a little bit more structure. This is a really cool looking baby anatomy scan. So we know that we have all of these suture lines. We know that we have a bunch of different bones and of the head and the jaw. We have all of the different sutures and the soft spots. We have the jugular foramen and we have the foramen magna. The foramen magna is the big hole at the bottom where your brainstem comes through. Your jugular foramen, we'll talk a little bit more about that one in just a second. But let's look at baby's head shape. So ideally, their heads are nice and round. And we know that during birth, those bones move together. And then after birth and over the next few weeks, those bones should come back out and we should see the suture lines. And we shouldn't have any overlapping after baby is born. So let's talk about some different head shapes. Scaphocephaly, that's when you have a very narrow head. So these are usually babies that were in the NICU and their heads get really narrow because they've lay on one side and then they'll flip and lay on the other side. So they'll have these really narrow faces, but that's also going to narrow our airway. So instead of my palate being nice and U-shaped and all of the arches, the pharyngeal arches, all of those are going to narrow. So our airway also gets more narrow. The next one is plagiocephaly. So that's one where maybe the back right side of the skull is more flat, or there's the baby's losing hair, but it's only on one side. So what you're going to start seeing with that one is their entire cranium is going to start moving And you'll start seeing it in their mandible, in their maxilla. So their jaw bones can start rotating as well. So the first little kiddo, you can see his cheek on one side is further forward than the other. So right now, baby is just focused on breast milk or formula. But later on, when we start getting teeth and having solids, foods, our teeth aren't going to line up very well. And so that's one of the issues that we have with plagiocephaly that we're trying to prevent. And then the third one is brachycephaly. So brachycephaly is the babies that lay on their back all day, every day, and they're just flat across their whole back. Their airway is also going to narrow, but it's going to narrow front to back. So as the back of their head flattens, you're also kind of messing with where your brainstem comes out, that foramen magna. So your brainstem area is going to get smaller, and the area for your airway is going to get smaller. So sometimes with these babies, we'll see that they keep their tongue out of their mouth, and it's not because they can't keep it in. It's because when their tongue is in their mouth, it's in their airway. And so they're leaving that tongue out so that they can breathe better through their nose. And then real quick, we'll go over the jugular foramen. There are 3 different cranial nerves that come out of there. So we'll pop back over here. On that bottom picture on D, you have the big hole at the bottom, and then you can see little indentations kind of to the left and right of that. That's where your jugular foramen is. Out of that comes 3 different cranial nerves. Your glossopharyngeal nerve, which gives us sensory to the throat and the back of our tongue, and it gives us the motor movement for swallowing. We have our vagus nerve, which is sensory to our outer ear canal, motor movement to the back of our throat and our pharynx. And then it's our parasympathetic nerve that deals with rest and digest. So the vagus nerve goes to every organ in our body except for, I think, the adrenal something. It goes to just about everything. So it's really important that it has lots of room to get down there. So if you talk to pediatric chiropractors, a lot of the adjustments they're doing is to make sure that our nerves have room to talk to our organs in our body, and a lot of them focus on this vagus nerve. The third nerve that comes out of the jugular foramen is our accessory spinal nerve, which is what gives us movement of our shoulders, and that sternocleidomastoid, which is again one of our neck muscles. When we're looking at structure and function, different breastfeeding postures that we use. We always want baby to have a neutral spine, but room for neck extension so that they can gape and latch onto the breast. But in this picture too, we want to talk about mom as well. So mom is leaned forward, her shoulders are hunched over. Usually we're looking down, so our neck is stretched out and we're looking down. And all of these postures can affect our ability to breathe. So if you're slumped forward with your neck down and you try to take in a big breath, your belly kind of hits your legs or it hits your arms and gets in your way, so you don't get as much pretty diaphragmatic breathing that way. So we like to sit up nice and tall so we can take in that big, deep breath. And then here's another picture on posture. So the red lines, if we're breathing through our mouth is open, so our jaw is slack. When we do that, we tend to bring our head forward. So our eyes are kind of looking up, our head is resting on our shoulders, and we kind of sit back and breathe like this. That's going to give us a really beautiful hump on our back when we're 80. And we always made fun of old great Meemaw's back hump. We don't want that. So let's close our mouth and sit up tall as we breathe. So early identification and intervention. So what does this look like? If you have a baby that's breathing through their mouth If you have a mama, a daddy, a grandparent, if it's you breathing through your mouth, these are some things that we want to look for. So optimal breathing, our lips are sealed. It is silent. So there's no snoring, snorting, grunting. It's not a gasp. It's not raspy. It's not wheezy. Breathing should be silent. I know we have a lot of little babies that sound really congested a little while after they're born, and a little while is okay. We know that being born, there's a whole lot of things that have to go on. But after, our breathing should be silent. It should be effortless. So if you see babies and they're breathing, and every breath they take, their chin, their neck flexes, and their shoulders are going up and down, or their nose holes are opening and closing, that is not effortless. That's a whole lot of work for them to breathe. And we need to get that checked out pretty quickly because that can be a sign of infection, a virus, colds. We need to make sure that these babies are getting oxygen to their noggins. We want to make sure that our breathing is nice and slow. It's not fast and shallow. We want it to be regular. So we should be able to breathe, 15 breaths per minute, and that should be the same throughout our day. And then we should be using our diaphragm. So our upper chest shouldn't be moving. So with a baby, how do we know if they're breathing optimally? And how do we know what else you may see when maybe we're not breathing through our mouth all the time, but what are some other things? So breathing through an open mouth, if they are extending their head while they're asleep. So if they're laying on their belly and they're arching back, or if they're laying on their side and we're arching, that can be a sign that we're not breathing well. They have restless sleep, teeth grinding as a child or as an adult, having night terrors or sleepwalking. All of those are signs that we might not be breathing optimally. But why is it important to breathe the right way? So if we're not breathing well while we're asleep, we can have excessive daytime sleepiness, impaired growth or failure to thrive even, moody behavioral problems, bedwetting, body aches and pains, impaired verbal skills, a cognitive impairment, poor school performance. There's also an increased likelihood of developing ADD or ADHD simply from not breathing through our nose and breathing optimally. So 2 different types of things that our kiddos can be diagnosed with is sleep disordered breathing. So that is when we're snoring for more than a few minutes, we're mouth breathing, and we're taking pauses while we're breathing. There's also behavioral sleep problems. So we're refusing to go to bed, or we get up after we're placed in bed. We wake up in the night. We wake up early. If we're restless and have nightmares, those are 2 different things. This one study shows that sleep disordered breathing and behavioral sleep problems, it increases the chance of having a special education need by 40%. So that I feel like is a huge number, just by I'm not breathing right when I'm asleep, and now I need help at school because I'm sleepy or I can't pay attention. Those are 2. And then we have sleep apneas. So there's apnea of prematurity. So that's common in the NICU. And that's when we stop breathing for more than 20 seconds. There's sequential apneas. So if you stop breathing for 3 to 5 seconds, so you're getting decreased oxygen to the periphery and your cerebrum. So the periphery is down to your fingertips and down to your toes. Your cerebrum, that's a part of your brain. So even not breathing for 3 to 5 seconds, which often won't trigger an alarm on an O2 sat monitor, those can still have poor outcomes later on. Then we have obstructed sleep apnea. which is so snoring. We have labored breathing or paradoxical breathing. Paradoxical breathing is instead of my chest rising to fall as my abdomen rises and falls, you'll see that the chest may come up, but the abdomen actually pulls in. So you're breathing in by sucking your belly in. So that's paradoxical. Obstructive sleep apnea is daytime sleepiness, hyperactivity, behavioral and learning problems. We also have central sleep apnea, and that is when our brain isn't being triggered to breathe. So we know to breathe because the level of CO2 increases. Our brain says, oh, there's too much CO2. I need to breathe that out and breathe in more oxygen. So when our brain isn't triggering to that response, it's also not having great control over our diaphragm or our intercostal muscles. And so our brain freezes for a second and we stop breathing for a short period of time. So there's the study on the right, short sleep apneas. They weren't triggering alarms. So it's not being treated in the NICU. So over time, time spent having a respiratory event was related to a reduction in language development and motor outcomes at 6 months old. So if you were in the NICU and your O2, you stopped breathing for 3 or 4 seconds, but your O2 monitor didn't pick it up, at 6 months old, you have a delay in speech and movement for reaching those milestones. So baby breathing is really important. And breastfeeding requires that suck, swallow, breathe coordination. One of the cool facts about breastfeeding is that if you breastfeed for longer than 1 month, you're decreasing your baby's risk of having an apnea. If you breastfeed longer than 1 month, both of those say 1. I think that second one is supposed to say 4 months. Don't quote me on that. But breastfeeding longer than, I think, 4 months decreases the risk of your baby snoring. And why are those two things related? It doesn't necessarily say all this in the study, but my hypothesis is that because breastfeeding requires more oral function than bottle feeding. So in order to breastfeed, our tongue has to extend out, elevate up, and then cup, like a taco. If we are breastfeeding, our tongue is having to do all that work, so our tongue is getting nice and strong. So when we're asleep, our tongue is staying suctioned to the roof of our mouth, so it's not falling into our airway as we sleep. So as we sleep, our muscles, the tone in our muscles decrease. Our tongue is a muscle as well. So if our tongue isn't conditioned to suction to our palate, it can fall back further into our mouth and cause us to have apnea events and snoring. So if you see a mama, a baby, whoever, breathing through their mouth, you can and should refer them to a specialist. But who is that specialist? So someone who has a license to touch, so massage therapist, craniosacral therapy, craniosacral fascial therapy, chiropractors, PT, OT, speech. I put chiropractors on there twice. All of these, and there's a few more that have a license to touch. But we need someone that's trained in airway, because a lot of our therapists and chiropractic friends, they're looking at the nervous system to get it to calm down. But we also need to make sure that we're building that muscular strength on the other side. So getting someone that's trained in airway, and then we all work together. So that includes the dentist or the ENT that's trying to get us to breathe pretty. We want to breathe pretty so that we have pretty faces when we grow up, which sounds kind of crazy. But as you saw in those jaw pictures, our jaw development, it really does start from infancy through adulthood to get those changes. So here is just an outline of some reasons why nasal breathing is better for you than mouth breathing. Decreased illness because of the cilia filtration in our nose. Increased oxygenation of our tissues because of that nitric oxide. It's preventative for adenoid and tonsil hypertrophy. So kiddos that mouth breathe typically have enlarged adenoids and tonsils that are removed. Breathing through our nose also decreases bad breath. So if we're breathing through our mouth, all of those germs are getting in our mouth and giving us bad breath. It also improves your gut microbiome. It helps with jaw development. It's going to give us straighter teeth. We're going to have a better posture. We're also going to have fewer cavities, and it can help decrease our risk of gum disease. So all of these things are just by breathing through our nose instead of breathing through our mouth. So it is 2:51. What kind of question and answers do we have? And I will leave this slide up. These are a list of books. If you're interested in learning more about breathing through your nose, this is my book list. But any other questions? Let's see. Is there a genetic component to this? Can it be inherited? That is a whole rabbit hole that you can get into. So yes, it can be genetic. Me and my dad both have small jaws, so we have smaller airways. But this can go way, way, way back to the fact that our ancestors were eating harder foods than we're eating now. So we're eating, steamed vegetables. Our steaks are nice and tender. We don't have to chew them as much. So over time, looking back through the hundreds of years, we as humans have actually changed our faces and our jaw size. So that's a whole rabbit hole of things. But yes, it can run in families because it is a physical trait. The same way that you have tall parents, you're probably going to have a tall kid. If you have a small, underdeveloped jaw, there's a likelihood that your kids will also have a small jaw. At what stage is the jaw developed to the final point without orthodontics? Whew, I can't read. At what stage is the jaw developed to the final point without orthodontics to change the jaw shape? So there is a wonderful physical therapist named Cynthia Peterson, and her entire career is based on jaw shape. She is who I learned a lot of this from, and she has a book that talks about TMJ disorder. So our TMJ joint, pain, popping, clicking, whatever. She actually has a book, and it talks a lot about changing your jaw shape even as an adult without needing orthodontics. Let's see. I didn't put that book on there. What's it called? It's TMJ something something by Cynthia Peterson. When we have our little kids, our little kiddos are typically getting braces in early elementary school, late elementary school now. And there is still a wonderful chance for them to try to change their jaw shape before needing orthodontics. But at that point, most of our jaw development is within those first 5 years of life.
Okay.
Let's see, can we get a copy? This perfectly describes my son. Megan, I am with you on that one. My son also, he is the perfect example of what not to do when you're asleep. So he sleeps curled up in a ball with his head extended, mouth open. He is the perfect candidate of doing therapy to help change that. He's almost 2. So PT wise, OT wise, we've been working on it with some positive change. Once he's 4 years old, we'll actually start doing something called orofacial myofunctional therapy with him. Looks like Emily has dropped an Amazon link in here. Is that to Cynthia's book?
Yes, the TMJ healing plan.
Yes. Yes, that is her.
Yeah. That looks very interesting.
It's very interesting. And she started doing all of this because her grandson was in the NICU and his breathing was really terrible. And he had this huge CPAP on his face all the time. And that's hindered his jaw development and his facial bone development. And so when he was in the NICU, she would actually come in, she would hold the CPAP on instead of having it around his head, because that constant pressure is telling our body, hey, don't grow that way. And so that kind of sparked her interest in this. And now she's been doing airway PT for 30 years, I think.
Wow. This is so interesting because I think we're all probably sitting here thinking, oh my gosh, that's my kid, or that's me.
It's crazy how much this can affect. Like my son that I'm referring to is 9 now, but he had the night terrors, he had the sleepwalking, he has ADHD, and like all of that. And he still breathes through his mouth a lot. Like he can't chew with his mouth closed because he can't breathe through his nose, I guess. I don't know. I've asked him like if he has trouble breathing through his nose and he says no. But yeah, it's crazy how many of those things apply to my son, and he totally mouth breathes a lot.
Yeah. Yeah. So my advice would be to find typically these are speech therapists that do the orofacial myofunctional therapy. They will help train you to close your mouth and breathe through your nose instead with a specific set of exercises.
Can you
Also,
type that in the chat so I can I'll never remember that on my own.
orofacial myofunctional, and I'm pretty sure that's it. If you type that in, it'll pop up either way. But you can even start with mouth taping at night. And so it looks like a rectangle and there's a hole in the middle so you can breathe. It's literally a piece of like kinesio tape that goes over your lip that can help activate that muscle to keep it closed at night. So my son doesn't tolerate that yet. But I tape at night, and I'm not a mouth breather. I breathe through my nose. But something about having that tape, it increases how deep you can go into sleep and how much more rested you feel the next day. It's really fun.
Yeah, he's also autistic, so he's got some sensory things. I think that would probably be a fight not worth having.
Oh yeah, yeah. I won't worry about that one. Mm-mm.
But I
My
mean,
son,
I might do it for myself though, if I can get
yeah,
deeper sleep.
yeah, it's really interesting. All of the airway stuff um, can change. You're more sick because you're not getting filtering all of those germs through your nose. Um, it kind of it feels really basic to say we need to breathe through our nose, but there's a lot of benefits, and we were made to breathe through our nose.
This has been fascinating. Absolutely fascinating.
I'm so glad.
Oh, okay. So Lulu says she's an SLP. Do you have any CEUs you recommend? I'd love to start seeing infants. And
Ooh,
Lulu's one of our instructors in Jacksonville, Florida. So she would be seeing a lot of babies anyway.
yeah. Let's see, Jacksonville, Florida. Um, I'm in a mentorship group. That's what I'm thinking through. I should have said that first. I'm in a mentorship group through Milk Matters um, on Instagram. Her name's Giselle Tedros. She has a lot of therapists that come and do mentorship with her. And I'm pretty sure there's someone in Jacksonville that you could connect with um, to talk through a lot more of this stuff with. And I can find that out for you if you're interested in doing that. So a lot of my favorite CEUs, Cynthia Peterson, that is her baby. It's called Baby Jaws, breathing nose to toes. She lets that for you don't have to be a PT to be in that course. So she's big in this world. And then um a lot of this I feel like also comes from oral function from birth and the impact that tongue ties have. Um, Not structural tongue ties, but dysfunctional tongue ties. Um, so talk tools, Robin, I can't think of her last name, but talk tools. They have a couple different CEUs as well on there. And then um, one of the books on here is called Breathe. That book is fascinating because it's written by a journalist. The journalist had a friend that was a medical doctor, and he said, "What happens if I close your nose holes and I force you to breathe through your mouth for 3 weeks or 6 weeks?" I don't remember exactly. So every other chapter is about that experiment that they did together.
Oh, wow.
And the other chapters are about different methods of breathing. So like one of the chapters was talking about how the monks can sit in snow and modulate their breathing to where they're actually sweating, even though they're not wearing any clothes sitting in the snow. And then different breathing patterns. So the one that we did earlier was the 4-4-8 pattern. There's a lot of different breathing patterns that you can use. But I think Cynthia Peterson, she is not cheap. Her CEUs are spread out throughout the year, but she is the biggest airway person that I know of.
Okay.
And then there's people like Richard Baxter. He's a dentist. He wrote Tongue Tied on there. He's a dentist, but he is an airway focused dentist. And so he has a lot of cool studies as well.
Okay. I have some, I guess, other questions that I'd like to ask you, but they're really like rehab focused. So I'll spare everyone else that. And maybe if you could give me your email or something, I would love to talk to you more.
Yes, absolutely. I will drop my email into the chat bar so you'll have it. And then my Instagram is milestonestw.com. I share a bunch of stuff on there, airway, PT, and OT stuff. Robin Walsh, Ellen, that is right. Robin Walsh, SLP.
With Talk Tools.
Yes.
Yeah, I'm familiar with that. Thank you very much.
No problem.
Cool. There we go. Yeah, this was so interesting to me. I mean, I think we all just consider like, oh yeah, you should be breathing. But just the ramifications, the snowball effect of mouth breathing versus nasal breathing, I just had never thought about all of that.
Yeah. Yeah, it's like I said earlier, it sounds like a topic that's like, oh yeah, we breathe. But actually digging in and looking at why we breathe through our nose, why we need good posture. Um, it's all really fascinating. There's not a lot like CEU stuff that we can get as therapists that really dive into airway. But it's starting to really pick up. Talking about good posture while I slump in my chair all the time, all the time. I've corrected my posture probably 12 times since I've been on this interview because I like to sit with my chin really far out. But I bring back. Oxygen is number one. After that, water, sleep, move, and then food. Yeah. So, I talk about tongue ties a lot just because that's the space that I work in. But a lot of people say, "Oh, they've got a tongue tie. They can't eat. Let's just release that tongue tie." And then you realize it wasn't the tongue tie that was the problem. Um, it was because they weren't breathing the right way. Their jaw wasn't developing because they weren't breathing the right way. So breathing is, we can go a couple minutes before we need to take a breath. For me, I feel like it's a few seconds.
So, for us birth workers or SLPs or whatever, if we're with a client and we see that their baby is mouth breathing, what do we suggest? Like, who do we send them to get their baby checked out and see what needs to happen to fix it?
Yeah, so you can always send them to my Instagram page. That has a lot more information in it that they might be able to digest. And then there's not a lot of airway specialists out there. I think that speech language pathology has the upper hand right now on airway stuff. But even in that, there's not a lot that are specialized in airway. But you can always send them to my Instagram and have them send me a DM. As a physical therapist, I cannot provide therapy treatment unless I have a license in that state, but I can provide wellness. And so, wellness for someone, you were in St. Louis or Illinois. So, I would be able to talk to them via like a teletherapy appointment just to kind of give them a bit more information. And then I can try to find someone where they are. Milk Matters Physical Therapy is my mentor, and she has an interactive map on her website of people that she has trained. And a lot of us are interested in airway, even though we're not. Her focus is more tongue ties, but a lot of us that are in the tongue tie world are also in the airway world.
Wow. Well, I don't want to keep people and I don't want to keep, I know you have a hard stop. I think you said at 3:15. So
They're okay. It's all right.
okay, okay. But gosh, this has been so fascinating. Thank you so much.
You're so
If
welcome.
I can get the slides from you, I think people would appreciate that. And for the folks that registered, like pre-registered for this, I will send out a link with the video of the session, the Zoom video, and also with the slides, and I can send out another copy of the CECs. So the CECs that we provide for the Boost Your Knowledge are from ICEA, which is the International Childbirth Educators Association. You can petition a lot of different places for CECs from ICEA. So you don't necessarily have to just use them for childbirth because of the topic. You might be able to use them for some other things. So just know that. And again, thank you guys for coming today, and just really appreciate Dr. Cheyenne for coming and sharing her wisdom with us. And if we don't have any other questions, I will stop the recording and we will say goodbye. So again,
How do we get the slides? How do we get those?
I will send this in an email out.
Okay,
If
sweet.
you pre-registered for this, we have your email.
All right.
We will
Thank
send.
you.
Yeah, and I did drop, if somebody's desperate for the CEC certificate, I will drop it in again right now. Oops, let me send that to everyone, not just to Cheyenne. Go.
Thank you, Cheyenne. This was very informative.
You're so welcome.
It was great. Well, thank you guys so much, and everyone have a good day. And
Thanks.
we have
Sure.
another session coming up next month, and that session will be from a registered dietitian and nutritionist who will be talking about nutritional needs for each trimester of pregnancy. So,
And that's one of my friends, Miss Alex.
no, y'all have to be really careful because I will ask my friends for favors.
Absolutely. Bring it on. I see people's babies all the time. They're like, can you just come hold my nephew? I'm like, sure.
Yeah. And also, if you guys ever if you yourself have a topic that you are, you feel like you can share on and you want to share and boost your knowledge, contact me. Or if you know of someone that you think like, hey, they would be great, send them my way because I will ask them to do a session. So, all righty. Well, everyone have a great day. Thank you again for attending, and we'll see you next month. Bye.